All right, everyone. Welcome back to today's episode of Words of the Wise. Today, I have Chief Morgan from Bucknell University, PD in Pennsylvania, over 20 years experience in law enforcement. He's recognized for advancements in community policing and organizational reform. Welcome to the show, Chief Morgan.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the welcome and the invitation to be here today.
Of course, I'm looking forward to it. When I was reading through our notes, I know that wellness is something that's important to you. I know it's something that you guys have been prioritizing. So I appreciate you coming on here today and sharing some of your insights and wisdom with our listeners. I would like to start with a little bit of background. So anything you want to share about yourself, your career, give us a little insight into who Chief Morgan is.
Yeah, thank you. I started my career with the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety in Kalamazoo, Michigan. It's still the largest combined cross-trained department in the country. There, you're a police officer, you're a firefighter, and you're a medical first responder. So you're responding to all three, and it provides a unique experience, insight into different disciplines, and really you get a lot of reps and work in the incident command system because you're utilizing it so often. So started my first year there, went to the narcotics team, spent 5 years with the team, and then came back to patrol as an officer, moved to sergeant, then lieutenant, then senior shift lieutenant. And then I was fortunate enough to get my first chief's job with the city of Covington, Virginia, where I came in after a period of turbulence, was asked to implement some changes and reforms that were based on an external review, and the team there did remarkable work. I was then recruited to go to the city of Mount Rainier, Maryland, to do some similar work. And again, the team did great work. And then after that, I made the transition into higher ed. It was something that, coming from afar, thinking about, I had children who were approaching college age and thought about the unique opportunity working at an institution would kind of provide for them, and made that leap. So went to California for a bit, and then here in Pennsylvania, and I've enjoyed the career that I've had, and it's been a great run. With that, one thing, around wellness, why I believe it's so important in my early experience with that is, as a newer officer, still in field training, it was my second or third day uh, in FTO. We had an officer who committed suicide, and his locker was very close to mine. It was in the same station that I was working out of at the time. And you're 21, you're trying to kind of process this piece, and this was at a time where mental health or acknowledging certain things within an organization wasn't as accepted as it certainly is today. And we just went on like nothing ever happened. And that always stuck with me because it was certainly not something that I expected to see and or experience. And there was an impact. And so there's those psychological things that, maybe folks don't know that you kind of carry with you. And then, of course, throughout a career, you're seeing all kinds of things that are not normal for the public to kind of see related to the loss of life and other things. But again, my first foray into something like this was a colleague. And certainly in my career, recognizing the importance for speaking up and officers advocating and with not realizing the symptoms of some of the behaviors that we're seeing with our folks. The genesis of them comes back to wellness, not only physical wellness, but mental wellness. And have we, as an organization, empowered our people and empowered ourselves to talk about challenging things in a way that helps make sure someone can do a long career and be okay after it?
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing. I really appreciate that. And I thought it was really impactful for you to say, like, everyone acted like it didn't happen, but it did happen, and it impacted everyone around. But maybe at the time you didn't feel like you could raise your hand and say that because it wasn't a part of the culture. How did you start that conversation? How did you start advocating for yourself and for others? When did that begin in your career?
Yeah, I had a colleague, Dave Thomas, who he championed at a time when it wasn't always popular in law enforcement to champion mental health for officers and mental wellness, and a lot of things that departments are doing now, a lot of things that are now more acceptable. He was talking about 16, 17 years ago. And having someone like that who was a colleague of mine, we came up in the organization together rank wise and those pieces, someone certainly I looked up to, use his voice in that way certainly kind of encouraged and empowered me to use my voice. And this is where kind of leadership matters. There's not always rank. It can be informal, but to your point, someone speaking up because it can create an environment where others can speak up and recognizing that it's important when you have officers going through different things. And as I came up, through the ranks as a supervisor, not always going to this person did something and their intention was bad. What was behind it, right? So what stressors are affecting them kind of in their home life? Where's their head at? And being more engaging and a little bit more mindful inquiry. And it also taught me to really be intentional asking people how they're doing and really paying attention to how they're doing, because oftentimes people will give you some keys that this is beyond someone not having a bad day. This is a human being who's struggling. And so what does it look like as a leader, kind of recognizing someone is struggling? Again, I'm not equipped to handle every situation, but what does it look like talking to them about kind of resources and connecting them with those who can kind of help them navigate those challenges? So I think having someone model that for me, quite frankly, and talk about it in an open way at a time that maybe it wasn't always so positive, certainly empowered me to say, you know what, that's leadership. And it's not always popular, but it's the right thing to do, and do it too.
Mm. Wow, there's a couple things I want to kind of dive into that I thought were so cool. So, the courage to go first. And I love that you said leadership isn't always rank. And I think it's so true. We've seen that. We've seen so many informal leaders step out and do really great work. And for someone to have the courage to go first and to talk about things that weren't popular or cool and being okay with not being cool, but knowing that it's something that was necessary gave you the confidence to then start walking down that path and to start prioritizing it for yourself and for others. I think that is such a cool story, and I appreciate you sharing that. But the other thing that you said that I thought was really important is being able to separate behavior from the human being. And I was actually just having a conversation. There was a young man that I was talking to, and I say young man, he was probably mid 20s. And he was a firefighter. So you might be able to relate to this because I know you have experience in kind of all of it. But he was a firefighter for a couple of years. And he said he left the career early because there was excessive bullying and hazing that was going on within the organization. And he said two things that I thought were really interesting. One, he said that there was a time where he was in front of everyone, and this guy came up to him, part of his team, and punched him in the stomach. And he's like, he had two responses. He's like, one, I don't want to play the victim. He's like, even though I was, like that did happen to me. He's like, but I also was thinking in that time, what's going on with that guy? Why is he hurting enough to do something like that? And I thought that was such an intelligent, like an emotionally intelligent response to say, hey, I'm not condoning what he did. What he did wasn't okay. But also, I'm trying to ask myself, what is that person going through beneath the surface? Understanding that hurt people, and being able to identify that, like, maybe this isn't a bad person. Maybe they just really need help. Maybe they just really need some resources. They're going through some undealt trauma and things. It doesn't excuse poor behavior, but can we get them the help that they need so that they don't act like that moving forward, or that it doesn't get worse moving forward? And so that piece that you said, being able to ask those questions, how are you, trying to identify behavior versus the person, and can we get people help, I think was something really important to kind of circle back to.
Yeah, no, one of the things in this you talk, and again about someone younger, and this is one of the things that I certainly appreciate about the generation coming into this profession now, whatever segment of the first responder community they're entering, is I think they're advocating for, and they're saying some things that shouldn't have been acceptable, but have been within certain cultures for a while. isn't okay. And I'm not going to allow myself to be kind of treated this way. I often say within organizations, and this is something I got from a training I attended, where someone really talked about your culture being what you tolerate. And where that really resonated, I think, to this kind of story is, again, if people have learned behavior of employees is bullying or hazing, or I'm going to treat the new person this way, then the new person then learns to socialize that way and they treat someone else that way, even knowing it's wrong, right? And so how do you begin to build within your culture, especially knowing if we want to keep people in this profession, both mentally and physically, we can't do the things that were done when I started. It just doesn't, it's not going to work. Number one, it wasn't okay then. I
Mm,
get that was a different time, but it's just not going to work with folks coming into the workforce to the way today and the way they advocate for both their mental and physical wellness. And, I think back to a time, again, it was very common and still in some agencies, still common with staffing shortages where you're having people work 30 days in a row or more than that with no time kind of off. So they're not able to physically keep themselves kind of fit at a state of readiness. They're physically fatigued and mentally fatigued. And then we act surprised when they have an interaction with the public and it's horrible.
mm.
That's pretty predictable when we look at what wellness actually means and how we want an employee to kind of show up. But again, I think to that point, that's why leadership is so important. Having someone who's it doesn't have to be ranked as saying that's not okay. We're not going to treat someone in this way, and then expect them to stay with us. We have to start questioning what we're doing.
Yeah, you said culture is what you tolerate, and obviously that was a story of someone who left the career. Maybe that was a career that could have been saved, and so we're losing people because of this. And I love that you said it's predictable because we all know if it's predictable, it's preventable. Right. And so if you're seeing these things, then how can we work backwards? And how can we start putting in place training or processes that are going to help to reduce that risk? You might not be able to eliminate everything always, and I always tell, like, whenever we're talking about, obviously, my wheelhouse is going to be more like injury prevention and things of that nature. But I always tell people, like, you're never going to eliminate everything. It's never going to be injury elimination, but we can significantly reduce the risk of these happening in the future as long as we're proactive about it. And so it's that, if it's predictable, it's preventable, and how can we be proactive in making sure that it is?
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree with you more, right? And that proactiveness, we talk about wanting our staff and teams to be kind of proactive when it comes to work, but equally we need to be proactive about their wellness, proactive about our culture, proactive about establishing within our agencies expectations around the treatment of others and what is not acceptable. The more you can empower people to be advocates not only for themselves but for their colleagues. I'll often say, and I served in a department where we had an officer lose their life in the line of duty heroically, Officer Zapata. Um, a touching reminder of what are we doing for people from a relationship building standpoint when we're alive, and how would we feel if we never got to see this person again? What's left unsaid? What is left wishing that you didn't treat a person a particular way? And if you're going to be in a role of leadership, how is your agency equipped for the daily interactions that folks kind of are having kind of underneath you? And what are you fostering within your frontline sergeants and supervisors to sell people when things are happening? Let's knock it off. What does healthy workplace discussions kind of look like? That things that don't take away from a person and take away their dignity, but uplifts them, right? Because if that's happening there, it's going to happen in the interactions with your community. You show me department, and I've said this because I've come into agencies generally after scandal. You start asking the questions, you start digging a little deeper into what's going on, you're going to find things that why the outward behaviors happen were because all the inward things were missing as far as respecting each other in the workplace, having healthy kind of conversations, not tearing each other down, not doing things or engaging in practices that cause harm to your own employees, and then they in turn cause harm to the public. So I think your point is spot on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And I do want to dive a little bit into the next topic because you said that you do try to empower your employees to make positive life choices. Can you talk a little bit about what those conversations look like and how you're encouraging them to be proactive in their own lives?
Yeah, it's just really creating kind of an environment where it's okay for them to uh, tell their story, say their truth, and not feel like it's going to be a judgment zone where we're going to look at you and say, "Oh, you're weak," or "Oh, you just need to have more resiliency," or "You." Let's talk about what is going on, and having that environment where folks are willing to kind of come forward and talk about what's going on. And then once that kind of happens, then we can talk about how we can do things kind of together. I'll always say an organization needs to come 50% of the way. The employee equally needs to come 50, right? But
Yeah.
without that conversation kind of on both sides, neither party can kind of do that. So it's first empowering people to know that you can come forward with things, and we're not always just going to look at you and throw you away because life is challenging. Life is challenging for everybody. And it doesn't matter that you're a police officer or a firefighter or whatever you may be doing in life. Life is challenging. Family things happen to everybody. Illness happens in all kind of families. And so just making sure people feel kind of empowered to come forward and talk about it and not just hold it in. And then you're dealing with negative interactions and negative things within your job so often that all this negativity is just compounding. And eventually, like anything else it has to come out.
Yeah.
And so how do we keep it from coming out in a negative fashion? How do we keep something at a molehill level, not a mountain?
Yeah.
So those conversations kind of are important. Additionally, making sure what resources and programming do we have available for our folks? Do they know about those things? And then equally, what is the environment like? So if someone is going to be a little detached or distant during roll call, our supervisors trained to a level where they're pulling that person aside and saying, "Hey, I notice you're not paying attention and going in." They're not going to know how to do that if it's not talked about, modeled for them, and an expectation placed upon them to do that. And equally, you have to praise people when they bring these things up, right?
Mm.
Not from the standpoint of punishment for anyone, but the standpoint of you're actually helping the folks who work within your organization the same way we expect you to help your community. And yeah, it's just creating and fostering an environment where open communication, conversation, and dialogue can happen from the top down, and then just making sure that people are held to an expectation that you are doing those kind of check-ins with your folks, and having some of those one-on-one kind of conversations. So that way, again, we're coming 50% of the way to meet our people where they are.
Mm. Yeah, and I love that you said it's a partnership, because I think that it is a two-way street, right? You want the organization to be supportive of these things, and you want to build trust within the organization, and you want to be showing people that what you say is also true, right? You want to build trust. So if someone does come to you, they know that they do have the resources and they're not shut down, right? So it's as an organization wanting to make sure that you have the resources, the conversation, the training, all of the things you're building trust. But then on the flip to it, how can we also empower people to raise their hand and understand that yes, the organization is going to do everything that they possibly can, or at least we hope so. We hope every organization is doing everything that they possibly can. But how can you also be empowered to take action in your own life? And we all know that when you don't have an environment, even when you do have an environment, it's such a nuanced thing because I think that there is fear of being perceived a certain way. There is fear of being weak or broken or whatever that looks like. And I've definitely done that in my life too, where I've isolated and I've kind of shoved things down and not dealt with it, even though I did have supportive networks and people in my life that I probably could have gone to, but didn't feel like I wanted to. And so I love that you said it's continuous action to remind everyone and to train everyone and to provide the resources so that they know without a doubt that it is okay to raise their hand, and then empowering those people to raise their hand and take action because there's a deeper why.
Yeah, and it's critically important. I would say one of the lieutenant in my first chief job came to me about something they were navigating in life, and I thought it took great courage, just great courage to say it. But then it put the ball in my court of, okay, what are you going to do now that someone has done what you've asked someone to do? And I also think as a leader, it's you have to be honest in what you're expert in and what you're not. And it's okay that in this particular instance, I was not. And so, again, having a network of colleagues and having humility and reaching out and saying, what is something we can do organizationally to come 50% of the way? And I know later we'll probably get to this, but we did it. And it's a program we started there that I've utilized it at other departments equally as well. And the positive piece has been when I've told employees that this is something that you can utilize, this is something that you can do, it's at our cost. And I'm not being told about these conversations or these pieces, and that actually is what happens. We've had employees who are going through, unfortunately, divorces or other challenging events in life utilize these services, and it's helped them. And I've seen our complaints go down, right? Because again, you're getting someone who's coming to work prepared for work, having talked to an expert about different things and like not carrying the weight of the world. And then I'm asking you to go out there and do this tremendous, difficult job with all this other pressure on you and then expecting you to be superhuman when at the end of the day, everyone who's wearing a badge across the world is a human being. They have a human brain and a human heart, and life takes their toll on everybody.
Yeah.
And again, how do we make sure as they're having those interactions with the public, they're in the best possible shape that they can be, if we're not doing anything to make sure that the product we're putting out, the person we're putting out, is holistically in a good place.
Yeah.
That's a part of it.
Thank you. I know that in your bio, I talked a little bit about, your expertise in agency reform. And you talked a little bit about this before about how you've stepped into agencies who are, maybe in a little bit of trouble and you've been able to kind of, help build them back up to a place that's positive. Maybe this is a two-part question. And so if you forget the second part or if I need to repeat it, let me know. But how do you think leadership impacts the wellness of an organization? And how can leaders be a source of help and positivity and not a source of stress?
Yeah, I would say each place I've been, you pull up the thread of what went wrong. Now, you can assign blame on both sides, but at the end of the day, there were leadership issues and challenges or things not being paid attention to or things not being watched or behaviors not being stopped that led to the outcomes and what I had to walk into and the work I had to do with others to raise morale, to get folks back understanding their purpose and their why in the profession and what we need to go forth and doing every day. Leadership's essential to that. Again, if the head is going in a bad direction, the body's going to follow it.
Yeah.
So leadership is critical in these things. And so the other piece I think that is critical and really important for a leader, whether you're coming into a place or you're in a place or you're whatever level you're in, or you're that informal kind of leader, people are always paying attention to two things: what you do and what you say, and they better match,
Mm.
right? So if you're talking about your integrity, if you're talking about your ethics, if you're saying you care for people, you're saying this. What are you doing on this side to equally show that for people? And I'll often say, not show it in a way that I'm going to meet everyone's kind of opinion, but I'm laying out basic expectations around my own accountability. Here's how I'm going to hold myself accountable. Here's things you can expect. And then equally, I need to make sure that's happening. And I always understand this. I'm never doing it alone. There's other leaders, other folks who are doing that heavy lift and hard work with me. So, to answer that kind of question, I think leadership owns a lot of it, and it's equally on leadership to turn that ship kind of around and work with officers and folks on the front line to do it. You're never going to, and I've never come into place and turned it around all the way up. It doesn't happen. It's just impossible. You have to get buy-in. You have to get people kind of believing in the vision, and as you're vision casting, as you're sharing things, and you have to tell them their particular role and their particular part in making something happen. Then they feel a part of it, right? It's not just, oh, I've got someone I don't know in a glass house throwing stones and telling me what I need to do. They're telling me the why, they're telling me the how, and they're also providing and showing, and it's sometimes you have to show people things they haven't seen before, what to do and helping them kind of get there. But again, I think if the leader is modeling ethical behavior and is open about the importance of wellness, again, when I talk about, hey, we're going to make physical fitness a priority and you can work out on duty. Hey, what does it look like for me to come in when they're in the gym working out with them? If I'm going to talk about the importance kind of mental wellness and those kind of things, what does it look like for me opening up to a certain extent about my own experiences and the things that impacted me? And so I think there has to be that vulnerability on the part of a leader to build some authenticity with your team.
Mm. Thank you. You answered all my like follow-up questions, so I appreciate that. I know that we mentioned it earlier, but I would like to dive into some of those things that you have prioritized, some of those things you have implemented from a wellness perspective, and you found success. We have a lot of leaders who listen to this, and they're looking for different ideas, or some people that really just kind of don't know where to start, maybe don't have anything yet. So anything you're willing to share that you have found to be successful.
Yeah, and I want to I mentioned Dave Thomas really credit for this. He talked about this, and this is years and years ago, about the importance of for an agency having a mental health expert that's officers can talk to, somebody who actually specializes in the first responder community. And so, in my first agency, we were able to find someone to partner with to provide that service for individuals. And again, it was met with a little bit of skepticism, like, oh, he just wants to know from this person what's going on kind of in our head. And I said, honestly, no, I'm not. You will see once you do it and try it. A part of this is they're not going to talk to me. The only way they will tell me anything, I don't even know who's seeing it. I just know here's what we've agreed upon as far as rates, and the city was generous enough to put some funding towards this to pilot this for a year. The only time they're ever going to say anything to me is if you say something where you're dangerous to someone, yourself or someone else. Other than that, it's none of my business. This is for you to better you. Also, equally, here's what it looks like to do some PT while you're on duty. So we're taking care both of your physical fitness and your mental health, recognizing that too. Hey, you may want to get some PT in, but there may be a call that kind of comes in. And again, you have to put some things around it. So parameters and those kind of things. You're taking in the input of other leaders who are overseeing personnel as far as what that would look like. But you're giving folks the opportunity to do things, not only work on their body, but also work on the mind, which in this job, you need both to be sharp, right? You don't need, it's great if your mind is, but physically you can't last 5 seconds in a fight because you're just not in the shape you need to be. And equally, it's great if you're in great physical fitness, but you don't know how to communicate with anyone because you are just so jacked up and angry all the time. So
Yeah.
they go kind of hand in hand. So starting kind of programs around employee wellness and that range and having it. And so here at Bucknell, we've had this for a while with our person, and it's been no different than Virginia. Similar here. It took one person to be the first person, and then other people followed them. And again, each place it's that initial person who's courageous, or the initial person courageous around, okay, I am going to take some time to do some PT, or I am going to reach out to this person here and talk to them about what's going on in my life. And again, I can say I've seen for those folks who have done both, taken advantage, a distinct difference, not only in their work performance and how they are as colleagues, how they are with the community. It's a difference because again, sometimes you don't realize, especially as a leader, you don't always know the weight your people are carrying, right? I can see physically that we're putting you in a vest and we have all this equipment on you, and I know how difficult that's going to be if you're in a foot chase. I can see that. What I can't see are the hidden things, right? I can't see what's physically going on inside of you. I don't know what your liver looks like. I don't know what your heart looks like. I don't know what your blood pressure level's at. Equally mentally, I don't know what other things are happening in your life. I don't know that a family member is suffering from a horrific illness, or someone is in hospice, but and you're carrying all of these things. So how do we help empower the human being and offer these kind of things for them? And then when they take advantage of it, just ensuring, again, that part of the leader is advocating above me or explaining, whether it's to a city commission and mayor and city manager or to university leadership, why this is so important. Not that police officers, firefighters, others are any better than any other employee, but their job's different. And because of the difference in the inherent things that they're facing, there are different ways we have to look at taking care of them.
Yeah.
And so just continuing to show people that above it works. And then, a part of it is making sure it's there for people. But that's been something that I think has been extremely positive for individuals, something that I've received feedback on from folks. And it's rewarding in that knowing that you're creating environment for people or avenues for people where they can talk about things that have been on their minds and hearts. And again, my goal is to never have within my agency a situation that I mentioned earlier where we didn't do everything we could for someone who was struggling, not to get to a place where someone thinks, boy, my only option here with the weight of the world is to then take my own life. What can we actually do in action to say, we care about you as a human being. We want you to be successful. We want you to make it to retirement. As long as you're with us, we're going to invest in you. At some point, if you decide to leave, that's a you decision. But while you're here, here's what it looks like for us as organizations to invest in your wellness.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think everyone who's listening agrees that they want to do everything that they can to avoid anything like that happening in the future. And I love that you said it started with one person, like buy-in started with one person, and then it builds from there. And sometimes that's what it takes, right? Sometimes it takes that boots on the ground effort of building trust, building awareness, creating the conversation, creating the consistency. And I agree with you. I think physical and mental are really important. And I think, I heard this quote one time that I really liked, and it said, the most important training is between your ears. We've talked about this a lot. Physically, there are a lot of first responders that work out. Not everyone, but a lot of people work out. They're used to the gym, right? You get the like really tight, buff dudes that are like, I'm healthy. But I love that you said, okay, but what's going on beneath the surface? That's first step. And we do want that. We want you to be physically fit, physically well, be able to do the job and have longevity. We know that muscle is incredibly important for longevity, especially as we get older. But what else is going on? Are you over caffeinated? Are you overstressed? Are you eating things that, in excess that maybe you could be making healthier choices? And it's hard to identify the things beneath the surface. When someone breaks their arm, you can tell right away, okay, they got a broken arm. What do we got to do to fix it? But all the other things are a little bit harder. And so I love your perspective on how can we be proactive with all of it? How can we start the conversation early? How can we build momentum one person at a time? And how can we create dedication over motivation? Consistency and routines over fleeting motivation, and I always put this in a silly example, but I think this relates a little bit. So I have always gone to the dentist twice a year. It is just something I've always done. Like when I was young, like, I don't know if it was like a parent or if they just told me on my insurance, like you have 2 visits a year. And I was like, okay, like that's how many times I got to go, and I have just every year I go to the dentist 2 times a year. It's not even a question. It's just what I do. How can we make all aspects of wellness that? It's like not even a question. It's just what we do because we know it's important to prioritize these things. We want to make sure that we're avoiding any major health issues from happening in the future. And if it's predictable, it's preventable. And we know the things that tend to happen in the first responder profession. We know the health issues that tend to happen. We know that there's a higher divorce rate. We know that there's a high injury rate. We know what types of injuries. We know the reasons for these injuries. We know that cardiovascular health is one of the top reasons why we're losing people in this career for a number of different reasons: nutrition, caffeine, stress. And so, if we know these things, again, how can we work backwards? Predictable, preventable. And then how can we just make it a normal thing that you just do every year? You just do it. You see your therapist, however many times a year you need to do it. You see your dentist, you see your provider, you get your annual physicals. Like, how is that just normal routine?
Yeah, no, and I
We'll get
love
there.
to, yeah, I love to you brought in the piece around diet and nutrition, which
Mm,
is so vital, and that's something that for us organizationally we've yet to tap into, but that certainly is a key piece to wellness. So yeah, I
yeah.
couldn't agree with that more.
I did want to, and I know we're going to run out of time here, and I knew this was going to happen. As soon as we started, I was like, man, we could talk for a while. But I did want to touch on one final piece of wellness because when we talked a little bit offline, and I'm assuming here, but I think based on like kind of your head nod when we first talked, you are really prioritizing community policing. That's something that's important to you. And I think based on your reaction to something I said earlier, you think that this also plays a role into overall wellness of an officer. And so, can you maybe touch on that a little bit? Some of the things you guys are prioritizing, and how do you think having positive interactions within the community helps with overall wellness?
It's huge. I'll use myself as the only example. And when I talk with folks, I will always defer to here's an example related to me where, again, if I look at mistakes that I made, if I truly kind of delve into here are things and lessons that you can learn through vicariously through me, and let me share about this. It's to that point. It's how important those positive interactions are to counter the negative. Because if you're only doing negative, if you're only having negative, you can begin to look at people, and these are other human beings in ways that aren't healthy, aren't positive, that don't look at their dignity kind of and worth. When you're constantly dealing and with negative, there has to be some balance. And organizationally, you have to create that for people, so that they're not always dealing with human beings at their worst, hearing them at their worst, or seeing them at their worst. There has to be some balance to that where they're seeing individuals from across the spectrum in positive experience, because that's the majority of it. I mean, we're dealing with a small percentage of the population who are engaged in negative practices at times and things that are crimes. But the vast majority every day are doing something good and positive. How do we get those interactions there? And so it's just really building in. We need you to have that foot patrol time where I'm not asking you to go out here and look for crime. I'm asking you to interact. I'm asking you to talk to neighbors, or I'm asking you to talk to students, or I'm asking you to visit this place and just say hello to someone. Here's an event in the community. I just need you to kind of show up there and interact and be yourself and get to know the community. Let the community get to know you. You're going to see them as a human. They're going to see you as a human, and relationships are built. And certainly from experience, I recognize and know the more that you have some of that, the more that you're going to counter things. One of the probably most impactful parts of my career is as an individual I sent to federal prison early in my career for narcotics, complete reform, football coach, reached out to me, saw some work I was doing in community with Kalamazoo, was like, hey, why don't you coach this kind of team with me? And most people would have said, does it look like for us to team up and coach kind of young people? Well, again, the person that he was, the person that I was when we were younger, we both grew out, right? My perspective was brought around what this career means in totality. His perspective around what it means to kind of, want to be in a community and doing the right things was changed. And again, to some degree, two people, second chance related, me more from the standpoint of, here's my initial career. I'm just focused on the rest, those kind of things. And I wasn't balanced on that engagement piece. It's just powerful, positive, and it helps you set the right kind of mindset. And it also helps you as an officer, I believe, connect with your community in ways that are immensely valuable. And they begin to see your department as a value add, not just someone lording authority over them.
Yeah. Well, I think it connects everyone back with their why. Because, I mean, I'm sure you've asked this question to a lot of people within your organizations that you've worked for. Um, Whenever you ask the why, especially for the younger, guys and girls, like usually it's in service, it's to help people, like for the most part, it's like, and I think when you lose touch with that and you feel like you're not helping people anymore, you feel like you're just reacting. And like you said, to the negative things over and over. And the more positivity you see in the world, you're actually training your brain to see more positivity. It's scientifically proven. And so I think that there always has to be a counter. And if you don't have the opposite of the coin, then it's really hard. You have to, and I think for me, like I do this every day because I'm not perfect. I catch myself too, where I'm like, ugh, like I'm doing this, and then I have to tell myself, okay, well, how can I see it in a different perspective? Or maybe this thing is kind of sucky, maybe it's not the most fun thing that we have to do right now, but how can I counter that by doing something that's rewarding or connects me back to my why? And so it trains our brains to understand that it's not all bad, right? There's the good stuff too. And the good stuff is well worth all the heartache and hardship that it takes to get there. For you to be like, hey, like I have story after story of people who I felt like I positively impacted, and you can connect to that, then it makes everything else worth it.
Yeah, great.
My final question for you is for that younger generation. So, the younger men and women who are coming into this career today, the informal leaders of the organization, what words of wisdom would you share with them that you wish you would have known when you were younger?
The importance of balance. We've talked about this. Really don't come in just siloed and thinking that without having done the job, without telling and doing it, that you have it all figured out. Really learn what true balance in this kind of profession is. And we talk about serving and protecting. We can don't get too lost on the protecting side and forget the serving side. And thinking about what true service means and elevating the needs of others above your own. You entered into it, and it goes back to something that you pointed out about your why. It's don't lose sight of that. So really just it's critically important to seek balance between both. You're going to do the protection piece, those calls are going to happen, but don't forget about the service aspect of this. That will help keep you grounded. That will help keep you kind of more fulfilled. And it's also going to, in the long run, make you not only a better officer, but a better human being. So that would be kind of my advice and advice that I share with folks new to the profession.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming on here today.
I enjoyed our conversation. I appreciate you having me.
Of course.